Hey everyone, welcome back to Taking Back Monday. I am so excited you decided to join us and say goodbye to the Sunday scaries and hello to more meaningful work. And I am beyond excited to introduce you to my new friend, Kendall. Welcome, Kendall.
Hi, thanks for having me, Alyssa. Appreciate it.
So, one of the things that we're always looking for is new takes on how people are really changing the way we think about work. And one of the things that you do, I think, is really interesting is focus less on the process of work and the experience of work and more on the relationships that we build inside of our workplaces. So tell us a little bit more about how you got into that.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, my story is a little complicated. I worked in big tech, and actually, the long and short of it is I was fired for not being a good teammate. And that was whether you're laid off, fired, you have these questionable times of like, what did I do wrong? Right. And it really made me laser in on the not only the things that I could have done differently, but also the systemic challenges where we never fully aligned as a team. Like in a group of 10 on a team, inevitably, like 3 were probably left out of the decision-making process, not feeling seen, heard, and valued, while the other 7 went ahead. And I think real alignment, actually creates a desirable place to work. It's how people respond to those questions, those surveys every 6 months, like, why do you want to stay here? Or how long do you want to stay here? And then they reply multiple years. But it's the people who, don't feel like truly part of the decision-making process, or like their value is actually seen and part of the team, that will just Irish goodbye and just switch teams, or, go to a different company, or, have conflict. And I think there's a real opportunity, especially in this distributed work times that we are in, where many people are working remotely, to have something better than, what we've had before. So that's why I develop in all my team gatherings. It's really a lot of virtual as well as in-person offsites to really build trust, build connection, and create alignment.
I'm just like sitting here taking notes because I have so many directions my brain wants to go with this conversation. So, you mentioned that, you were let go from a team because you weren't a good team player. And longtime listeners to the podcast know that it's my personal belief that your team dynamics is almost solely on the leader of that team. So tell us a little bit more of that situation. Like, what could your leader have done differently to draw you in?
Yeah, it's an interesting circumstance, because on that, I'll answer that twofold, because as your listeners know, there's usually a leader that's a horizontal leader on the team, right? Almost like the quarterback of the team, if you will. It's a peer, but they are in the leader position. So that particular leader had a vision for the product direction. I was working on a product team, and had a true vision for the way they wanted it to go. And mind you, the thing that they didn't share with me that I've now come to understand is they had just so much pressure coming from all the different parties, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to please. And so they had a vision. And then I was in a role, though, that where I was judged as a researcher, right? As research on a product team, you're basically judged based on how your ability to influence the product direction. But when you have someone who doesn't listen to what the research says, even though the research is showing over and over again that the product direction they wanted to take it in is not working with the customers that it's designed to work with.
Yeah.
So when you have that, and mind you, my entire ability to get promoted and stuff was based on my ability to influence this direction. And one person's like, well, I don't care what the research says. We're not going in that direction. What starts off as a minor misalignment really becomes like this, almost this like bear that wells up in me. That's like, in that situation that was like, wait a second, I'm not, there's no way for me to show my value on this team. And then it in these moments of misunderstanding, they really lead to this like survival, like, oh, I will prove you wrong type of thing. It get exacerbated. And so, and the thing I didn't know about that scenario at the time that I now see just so wholeheartedly is that the quarterbacks of the team, especially what I've learned about that particular role, that was a product manager. And what's interesting after surveying a lot of product teams is usually the UX researcher, which was my role, usually has conflict with the product manager. That is that's kind of a pattern, right?
Right.
Now, what was fascinating though, is that when I surveyed a bunch of product managers, they don't necessarily have conflict with the UX researcher. They have conflict with all sorts of different people because they're like managing all these different groups.
They're like the
So,
traffic cop, right? Like they have all these people coming in with. So it's so funny that you say this because we don't know each other before this call.
right.
I, for 10 years, led a team of UX researchers who went in as the outside third party. So we were an outside agency and we would come in and I would always tell people, look, my job here is to be the referee. You have all of these ideas. We are here to advocate for your users. You're not going to like what we have to say, but we're going to tell you the truth. And that was like so hard to be in that position sometimes because you have VP whoever who makes 10x what I do sitting there with
Right.
their opinions. And you have to stand up and say, I understand that these are your opinions, but you're wrong and here's why. Right? That is a terrifying position to be in.
And it's really tricky. What I've seen work then in that quarterback position, the product manager position, who's dealing with all these XFN, is really their job is to help create alignment, to make sure that all 10 of those people on that product team are aligned and that they've felt heard. And there's simple tactics to do that. And like, for example, just to give your listeners one that I think has been super helpful, is when you're moving in a product direction, actually, you can do this either visually on a Zoom call or in a meeting room, but say, okay, we're going to move forward with this direction, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest and most supportive. How do you guys feel? Where do you stand on moving forward? And then you can see visually on their hands, everybody puts up their hands. And you can see visually where everybody stands, and anybody 3 or less then has to really come back with what it would take to get them to a 4 or 5 so that they can have that team alignment. And just critical because when you don't have those moments before a decision is made, then, it's just people are left out and you get people starting to detach. And that's where I think real leadership is, as I've talked with other neuroscientists and other coaches, is like the real leadership is actually when you see that detachment, leaning in and naming it.
And calling it out and making sure that it's not just like, I'm the leader and this is where we're going. And if you're not with me, then you're against me. So get off my boat. Right. And I've seen the most successful leaders that I've seen do a couple of things differently. They don't set goals. They don't set outcomes. They set intentions and they say, here's where we're going. And I'm going to give you the why behind it. And I'm going to emphasis on the why. So yes, I want to build feature A, like whatever you want to call it. I want to build a chat bot that I'm going to put on the corner of our website, right? Give me a why. Tell me why we're going there. Well, why for your team? It's because it's going to give us something that we are building towards that's going to help shape the future of the company. You have an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than yourself that is more than just a 9 to 5 and is something that's truly going to change the game. We're building the first ever, chatbot or whatever. But then also tying it to your intentions behind the business. And we believe because we're going to build this chatbot, we're going to see a 10x in revenue growth. A 10x in revenue growth means we're all getting bonuses, we're all getting raises, we're all getting promotions, right? And tying it not only to the emotional experience that your team is having, but tying it to business outcomes and how this specific activity that we're going to undertake, whether it's a product, an initiative, simply optimizing the way we do our job, tying it to the business changes that conversation for both your stakeholders who want to hear why you want to do your project, but also your team who want more than just this is a job and you're getting your paycheck. People want to feel like they belong and like they matter and like they're making a difference and not just punching a clock.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love what you just said there, Alyssa. Like It's absolutely about, using that time to when we do have layoffs and when people are in this survival mode, how you can assuage that and not have everybody out to ship their own features
Yeah.
and be out for their own selves is to utilize that in-person time or create connected time, even virtually,
Yeah.
where you do create exactly that intentional alignment. Because when you come back to that, even though it might be idealistic, it sure is more fun than like this kind of survival mentality that's
Yeah.
overly competitive that creates a toxic environment, you know?
100%. And I've always had the fortunate experience to work with much smaller teams. I've been in like a small business startup. We consult with big tech corporations. And I was maybe naive when I first started consulting with these organizations. I'd been working with people um who really wanted the project to be successful, and it was mutual success, mutual support, mutual success. And then I got into this environment where it was much more corporate, and I didn't realize like the dog eat dog world that some people kind of live in. And what I experienced was what I'll call like corporate antibodies. I didn't realize that I had stepped into someone else's territory, and that by stepping into their territory, I was threatening their position. And all of a sudden, I started seeing like backbiting and back channeling and all of these things. And I'm sitting here going, whoa, I just wanted to come help. I just want the project to be successful. I don't care if I get the credit. Like, let's do good work. Right. And had this corporate antibody coming at me. And all of a sudden I found myself in like a targeted position. It was really jarring for someone who's never really had to experience that before.
Yeah. It's, I think that's part of the systemic challenge, though, of having the bonus structures a lot of times based on individual performance instead of team performance. I think
Yep.
there's something there. You look at, I'm reminded of, there was this amazing example of Tom Brady when he was like crushing it. And he actually, Gronk, needed to get a couple more yards
Oh, yes.
to
I've heard the
get
story. It's
this
such a good
million
story.
dollar bonus.
Yeah.
And he just straight up ignored the play call so that he could get his buddy the bonus. And like, that's teammateship. That is like trust.
Yeah.
And these are the elements too of high performing teams is trust. So you're not going to like magically have it if you don't invest time in it. That's why it's like incredibly important and healthy too to have regular moments of intentional connection. And like, I'm sorry, but I've lived it, and it doesn't work when you like bring people together for dinners and drinks. It certainly works better than nothing, but like dinners and drinks that are kind of unorganized don't necessarily foster the conversations that need to happen when so and so who needs to bond with somebody else, they're sitting at opposite ends or like of the table. Like, good, that's not bringing together what you need to do. I mean, that's why you have a facilitator, or you facilitate it yourself, but you facilitate intentional, deliberate, designed exercises to create connection across these cross-functional partners that need to know each other, to have trust, so they're not second guessing. And because when they second guess, it also creates longer processes. It's this double checking type of situation. And I'll tell you one other thing too is you mentioned what can leaders do. There's another aspect of when leaders see conflict between two people, you have to be self-aware enough to not insert yourself in taking sides.
Right.
That is a huge mistake I've seen. And it's really this triangulation where, you go from the outside to then one of those two people in the conflict becomes on the outside when this alignment, when that third party inserts themselves. And instead, it's like, if they want to be involved in some way, it's like, okay, creating a coaching opportunity for both of those people in the same room here.
Right.
And, it's not this getting in the middle of it for sure.
Right. Right. Almost like facilitating or mediating rather than like arbitrating. Right. You're not coming in as the leader to say, you're right, you're wrong. You're coming in to say, we're going to have a conversation and get to the bottom of this, and then let them, as adults, conflict resolute themselves.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, too, I mean, this is part of what I do in some of my journaling exercises in my offsites is really create the opportunity for what those individuals might be projecting from their past on the individuals they're seeing now. Because 99% of the times they get triggered based on, like, for example, in my case, I'll give you my example. Here was this person on my team, another strong-willed woman who, didn't make me feel seen, heard, or valued. It was her way or the highway. And I realized, I was like, okay, where else in my life did maybe a strong female not make me feel seen or heard? It was her way or the highway. And then it dawned on me, oh my God, was I just playing out mom shit in the workplace? Are you serious? And then it was just like, and like how different of an experience it could have been too, for me to have named that with that person, And clearly I was triggering something else for her, And it's like, wow, when you kind of create that separation, it can be very powerful,
It's
and
almost like that cliche,
place
like,
for
it's
healing.
not you, it's me, right? Like, maybe it's not you, maybe it is me. Like, maybe I'm
No,
projecting onto you. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, that happens so often. So
I
often.
I'm sitting here like aggressively remembering all of the times that I've done that. I'm like, oh my gosh, was I just creating a situation that didn't actually exist? Was I interpreting behavior because I had a fight or flight response to it from a different situation from the past? So I think it's really important to look at like to have that introspection to yourself. Am I part of the problem? Am I the whole problem? Right. And I think both sides have to do that in order to be successful because you might not be the problem, right? You might be
Right.
doing everything. You might not be projecting onto them. They might just have some baggage or some situations or just an intense amount of pressure, as you mentioned, to do something and have all of these people coming at them. And you're just one piece of collateral damage from their own spiral.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily get to those journaling moments until probably like the third offsite to build.
Yeah.
The first is really about building connection. The second is about building
Hmm.
alignment. And then the third is we do create this space to figure out people's conflict styles and then what the team wants to do when it has conflict. And then they kind of decide on a conflict style for the team, which is
Right.
really powerful.
And the
Because then they're
ownership of
opting
that,
in.
right?
Exactly.
To your point, though, I don't think you can really, like, if I'm a leader and I'm wanting to start implementing some of the things that we're talking about, I think it's important for you to recognize you're not going to be able to do those things overnight. Like the psychological safety required in order to have these frank conversations and to build something great is a huge barrier. And especially in a distributed or virtual work environment. One of the things I noticed, I work from home. My entire team works from home. Most of the people that I work with, I had never actually met in person because we're all over the country and we're a small company. And I noticed when I was going to my meetings that there was no like water cooler time. There was no social time. When I worked in an office pre-COVID, I knew, the name of the dog of my coworkers and I knew that they had softball this weekend with their friends or that they were playing in a beach volleyball tournament or that they had a vacation coming up and they were really excited about it. Like I knew those things because I'd walk through the office and we'd make small talk, right? But in this virtual environment, all of my meetings are so tactical. We have an hour, we're in a meeting, the people are talking, some people never talk, some people just lurk, some people are chatting. But there was no like intentional relationship building time because they were tactical. We were there to do a job. There was no small talk time. And I think that was something that for me in the moment, I realized, oh, I don't know these people. Why would they go to the ends of the earth for me if I don't even know who they are on Saturday and Sunday?
Well, and this is why, companies are experiencing this, like, is, especially, well, companies are experiencing this like lack of loyalty. There's like, oh, people are just leaving, just like almost like this mercenary culture. It's like, well, yeah, you have a mercenary culture because you're not spending any time to invest in the humanity of it.
You have a
So,
mercenary culture because you have created a mercenary culture by ignoring the
right.
humanity of your people. Like, this is a problem
Yes.
of your own making.
And this is why I'm I have to be honest with you. Like we are making technological advances with AI, etc. And it looks like and it is our future. But that's why I'm going all in on the human experience element for when colleagues really need to deepen that connection. We know that high performing teams have high trust. We know that. Like it's correlated. And guess what? High performing teams lead to higher output. So we know that building trust in a team, it leads to positive results. I mean, high trust teams actually outperform the S&P 500 by 400%. Okay, that is scale is done by the Fortune best or Fortune magazine's top 100 companies, of which trust-based criteria is over 60%. So that's how people trust their managers, how they trust their teammates. Like we know there's a correlation here. So as everything becomes more and more technological, really is about creating these unique experiences. And that's where I think, my experiences are, I think like normal offsites of like just just fun and drinks or
Right.
just escape rooms kind of miss the boat. Like for me, it's about, okay, how do we create the connection and the fun, but then also create the space for some real conversations about how can we can work more effectively together. So it's not just the either or. And I think that's the dynamic approach that I really enjoy bringing. And I think that's the thing that will be best for the future because that's what doesn't have this mercenary like culture. You create the connection and then you have, actual real conversations about working more effectively together.
So one of the things that I love in that what you said is, we talked in the beginning about intentions and understanding kind of the emotional side of the why with your team, but also the why for the business. I think you just laid it out, right? 400 times more effective if you invest in high performance team process, particularly around trust. Now, I'm a
Mhm.
firm believer that sometimes trust building exercises can feel disingenuous, right? So I actually focus on not building trust, but trust being a natural byproduct of consistent, transparent action, right? So how do we better understand our why, what we're trying to do, right? And how do we better communicate and connect? How do we hold each other accountable in a way that, you talked about, you set your conflict resolution. How do you hold your team accountable when they're missing the mark, right? How do you get them fired up about whatever we're going to go do together? And then how do you help them persevere when it gets tough, when we're sick of it, when it's been a while, or when we face constant barriers? How would you do that in a virtual environment? What kinds of tips or tricks do you have for teams that are distributed?
Um, well, for me, what I do is, I have a three virtual offsite sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And really, as I mentioned before, the first one is really all about building connection. And there are lessons in that too about learning to talk straight with one another. Like there are these things of building trust. Actually, Stephen M. Covey, he wrote a book called The Speed of Trust that maybe some of your listeners might want to listen or read. And some of the principles there are just it's simple, doing what you say you're going to do.
Yes.
Learning to talk straight. And sometimes when we aren't used to that behavior, facilitating simple exercises of really doing that. I know that may sound juvenile, but it actually, when people are doing it, it's just putting into practice the basic fundamentals that we all really need to have trust.
Right. The things
So,
we learn in kindergarten, right? Like those kindergarten behaviors
yeah,
of your teacher says, we're going to go out to recess, and then takes you out to recess. You start to build trust with your teacher that your teacher says, we're going to recess, right?
right.
Could you imagine if like kindergartner teachers played the game of like, we're going to go to recess. Oh, but first we're going to do, 6 hours of math, right? that trust would start to degrade at that fundamental level. As kindergartners, they would understand their teacher doesn't mean what they say. And yet we act this way with adults. We say, oh, we're going to give you bonuses, but only if you do these things exactly the way we want you to do them. But we're not going to tell you what those things are.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was talking with someone last week, and they gave me a classic example that I'll share with you now, which is just that their manager consistently every week would go over 30 minutes on this one meeting, and consistently.
I'm getting
And
like secondhand rage.
well, and I think, so much of what I've learned about moving the needle really is about having embodied leadership actually exemplify the behavior that they're seeking from their teams. Like you can't say, hey, everybody be on time to the meeting, or like, let's block off this time, and then not be accountable to the time yourself.
Right.
So that is why, like, that particular team, it's like, okay, regular check-ins of like a survey. Most companies do that, but then actually listening and looking at the survey feedback that's like, we're always late, this time. I mean, the funny thing is that particular individual then, as a pattern, didn't schedule, so the funny thing, actually, now I'm remembering that situation, the manager then wanted them to work extra on a particular assignment. And her whole thing was, well, why would I work extra on this, like outside of business hours, when you're already going over 30 minutes here?
Right. Right. You're
So
taking away the 30 hours I have given to you and asking you for 30 more minutes, right? Like,
right, exactly. So it's, and I asked her, have you shared this feedback? And she said, yeah, in surveys, but haven't yet had the conversation around it. And so I think it's really important for leaders when the stuff comes up in surveys to really listen, and then maybe have a neutral third party figure out some, in-depth interviews. This is where I put my research cap on, and, really figure out what's needed here. But I think embodied leadership is just hugely important. The more I've learned, it's like, that's absolutely how to shift things.
well, and how much of as an employee does it feel like you're just shouting into the void? If you've shared this feedback, and obviously the survey is not getting read, it doesn't matter. Or even worse, they don't care about our feedback. So why would I continue to give my heart and soul to something where they've made it clear, intentionally or unintentionally, that they don't care what I have to say?
Right, right.
Like, if you're not going to listen, don't ask.
Well, and that's why, for me, one of the things I advocate for is regular, like almost like a monthly half hour of analyzing how are we operating as a team? What's working, what's not working? Like a frank conversation. It's almost like a relationship check-in, which I don't care if that sounds woo-woo or not. The point is a regular, see, when you have a regular path to like kind of flush out the kinks, you have less cakes. Right? It's just intuitive that way. And so that's where, too, I mean, back to your point of like the distributed workforces and like regular, some sort of quarterly, at least, opportunity to connect with the colleagues, to further the relationship, to build the trust is just so vital.
Right.
So vital.
Yeah, it's taking that time to not work and be social and connect as human beings that will actually take your P&L from good to great, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think we could probably do this all day.
We could.
I'm loving it. But who do you know, or who can you think of that is really taking back Monday? Who's really taking it to the next level?
My coach is, and he's just fantastic, is Dan Martell. Dan Martell, find him on Instagram. His whole philosophy is embody the best version of yourself, the 10x version of yourself. And number 2, share it with the world. And I think that's going to make the world a better place, or at least that's his philosophy. And truly, it is like he walks the walk, and he really has all his, he's built, over $10 million, I mean, hundreds of $1 million in businesses. And he's run
Mhm.
so many different SaaS companies. And now he just coaches entrepreneurs and individuals on how they can be high performers. And it's just really, it's real deal stuff. It's no nonsense. It's living your truth stuff. So definitely encourage everybody to follow him because he like will broadcast his leadership, his on Mondays, he does a leadership coaching to his whole leadership team that he just broadcasts because he wants people to just elevate their work and principles. So
I love that. I love
yeah.
that. And if someone is really connected with you, they are looking to, maximize their team to beat the S&P by 400%. How can they find you online?
Yeah. Well, you can DM me on Instagram at Kendall Wallace 123. And especially if you are interested in any of the ways I organize my offsites or any of the exercises I use, I actually have over 100 exercises that I give away for free
Cool.
in my playbook because I just want teams to be more harmonious and connected. So happy to give that to you to help you plan your next virtual or in-person experience or just help understand what really creates connection. If you just DM me Alyssa plus playbook, then on Instagram, I'll send it to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us on Taking Back Monday, and we look forward to your continued success.
Thanks so much, Alyssa. This has been great.